Hola, hola, hola. Va a empezar la primera charla de Guadalindie. La primera charla es Nascimento, cofundadores y art director at Bunnyhug Games. Y ya está, os dejo con Lu. Un aplauso.
Hi. That's so loud. Sorry. How do I... Please bear with me, I'm a little bit nervous. It's been 5 years since I last did this. This is I Don't Want to Succeed for Art's Sake. I'm going to explore the approach taken in game development to prioritize art and the artistry of its workers, so we can change the expectations and dynamics to allow the game to become the game that it wants to be. Yeah. And disclaimer is that this is a rant. I have been a hermit for the past 5 years, and I only had 2 people to rant to this entire time. I'm going to try to make it fast until I get to where I shine the most, which is not necessarily art, but it's art documentation and working with a remote team. So I'm sorry if I'm opening the event talk by being an absolute bummer. Who's this? Hi, I'm Lu. I've been working as an artist for 15 years and in the games industry for 13 of those years. And I'm art director and co-founder of Bunnyhug. I don't believe in absolute truths, and this talk is based specifically on my experiences, and not everything, if anything, is gonna fit your situation, but I hope it can be elucidated either way. I'll get some things out of the way. I am a Brazilian immigrant in the UK. I'm also queer, and I'm disabled in multiple ways. So, like, those are the very specific experiences that I have. In 2018, me and my partner, Zach Soares, which is right in the front there, founded our studio, Bunnyhug, and we released our first debut game, Monglobain, in October 2021. And we were working alongside, me and Zach, alongside 6 other people, and at our peak, we were 12 team members. Like many indies, our studio was fully remote. We released the game by working 4-day work weeks in its last year. And we released a free DLC of Monglobain in April 2022, so 3 years ago. And where Bunnyhug is, and this is Monglobain, by the way, this is the game that we made. And Bunnyhug, post the release of the game, is not very happy news. We made a R&D session with all of our teammates to work on their own skills for a month. After that, we worked on a prototype for roughly 6 months. And now the prototype is shelved because we didn't manage to find funding. We had to take personal loans to make sure everyone had their salaries until they could get other work. And now it's only 2 of us working part-time, which is me and Zé, and 1 person working full-time. And Bunnyhug for the future, we are all hoping to be reunited at one point and become a co-op. And what do I mean by I don't want to succeed? Essentially, we're making games, not building a nuclear power plant. We didn't, and I don't want to engage in the industry's standard practices and behaviors that is to detriment of its workers. I believe that we can make games while respecting each other, and that's the only way that we will stop losing the talented people that make the games that we love so much, to burnout, stress, illness, all of that. I'm gonna say something that is not revolutionary at all. It's give your workers dignity and they're going to thrive. And what do I mean by we're not building a nuclear power plant? Nothing that we're going to do is crucial. Nobody's going to die if we have a bug. It's fine. There's no explosions that are going to happen. Where's the fire? I know most of us have a limited time due to budget, but I think there's ways of mitigating and not having to rush the entire time that we are making a game. The first thing is there's a myth that art is suffering, and we are also not making omelet. We don't need to break any eggs to make a game, unless it's for research or you're lacking omega-3, but even outside of games, I don't believe this myth of art is suffering. And I believe that makes the games are art. And as someone that is chronically ill, I promise you that the best and most that I have ever produced was not while I was rushing and have flare-ups and stress the hell out. It was when everything was chill and calm. You can't finish a marathon by running it the whole way full speed. And another thing is that I don't understand why we use tech-only approaches to games production when we're such a mixed media. There's Scrum, Jira, Sprints. Those were all processes that didn't work in our team specifically, especially when making art, because some things can take like literally 30 minutes, 5 minutes, and some stuff runs throughout the entire project and needs to be reviewed a few times to fit the gameplay and the game design. And I think we can review some of those methods, especially catering to our own teams. And we can question it based like, does reviewing every single task that we need to do, does it need to be done every week? If we're a minuscule team that is always talking, that is always updating each other. And like, there's also, of course, if you have a very fast timeline, it might be useful to apply that, but it wasn't the case for us. I have seen many projects that have suffered by trying to fit in that tiny little box of we're going to make this like a tech project with all the scrums and all of that. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen a painting very up close. I don't mean like a little bit zoom in. It's like, have you put your face to a painting? This is a painting by Afonso Muca, part of his Love Epic. And if you notice, some areas that aren't in focus, like the guy on the right, they have been done just enough for us to understand that is a person that is looking at us. But since it's not the focus, we don't need to over-detail it, like the guy on the right. On the left? I'm bad with sides, sorry. You probably can see what I mean. But we don't need to overdo it in games as well, in areas that are not the focus of our game. So why can't we use this type of approach to making our form of art? Getting things to a state of working is the same as the large brush strokes. It may not be clean, it may not be perfect, but it gets the job done. Getting these broad stroke ideas into something more specific and refined doesn't come immediately, and it may never be needed, by the way. But the other aspects of the game, but as the other aspects of the game come together, it's not even going to be noticed how blurry it is. Focusing on perfecting every single detail of a game leads to crunch. And a frequent observation that I have made while reading the articles and finding out about layoffs from friends is that it makes it very clear that producing a game giving you 100% of your efforts all of the time is not worth the possibility of success, because it also doesn't guarantee it. And I'm actually wrong. It's not 100% capacity. It's way beyond that. It's working past everyone's capabilities as human beings and ignores actual human needs like sleep, socialization, rest, etc. And I would like us to be realistic when talking about crunch and stop using euphemisms. When employees are forced to crunch, it's not only using someone's passion for your benefit. It's more than that. It's using structures of power like being someone's boss that controls their payments and their way of survival as a coercion tactic. It's exploitative, and you may not think that way when you're doing it or when you maybe requested someone to do it, and you may not have the intention when it happened, but it doesn't make it any different, and it's something that we need to conciliate with. Thank you. Thank you. And if you want another metaphor, hell is full of good intentions. You can't control everything. There's another myth of the author. And within that myth, there's two things for me. There's the genius director and the solo dev. I'll start with the solo dev because it's the lesser of my gripes. Because I believe that the perception of a solo creator is purely an illusion that we created. All of us have made a game know that you can't make a game entirely alone. It's not to discredit the developers that do work alone, but it's to understand that people around you, even those that aren't working directly in the game, literally like your mom that is helping you with the meals, your partner, your friends that are testing the game, they all help to contribute to this game coming to being. And even within development itself, like, is game testing not an essential part of releasing a game that is actually working? So why are we not counting those people when we talk about, for example, solo development? How about the people that ported the game? Because they are also somehow part of the team, right? Even if it's a different company. Every solo dev that I know has had a massive support network behind them to create their game. And we need to acknowledge this, otherwise we fall prey to that myth of the kind of, you can do everything by yourself, like you can exist in a vacuum and that's fine, which I think goes counter to the human experience. Yeah, and the biggest gripe that I actually have, and I don't have actually much to say about it, is the director, the author-director of a game, because I often see people in media being credited as the creator of this massive game. And often in interviews with those people, I see that they actually never mention even once the team that actually made that game into being. If, like, by directing, you can't create something alone. You have the instructions, and like, you don't have the ingredients, you don't have the means of making a cake. You're not gonna be able to make it just by having the recipe. And now it's another part of it. It's trust. Now that you got yourself a team and you need to make a game, I don't know, in a year, you may know your strengths and your weaknesses, and unless you have worked with the team that you have now, you won't know theirs. You need to trust them to give them when you give them a task, and you need to trust that you know that you're all following this mission together of making the game, and you gotta trust that you can accomplish that goal, and the people have the skills that they say they have, and they can show you where they actually need help. During the production of Moon Bay, I kept being asked all the time by publisher producers, why aren't my concepts in voxels or in pixels or already square? They're all rounded out. And the simple answer is that I trusted my partner to interpret the concepts that I made in their own way, and that would give a much more interesting result than me just controlling exactly how I wanted each square and each voxel to be placed. I trust their skills. And another part of trust is showing your teammates where your struggles lie, so they can also have the vulnerability with you. Because lack of trust and perfectionism, like a perfect recipe for a micromanager. And I think micromanaging is everyone's favorite little demon, because don't you love when you're having to push every single pixel in a screen one at a time while someone is like watching over your shoulder the entire time? And there's a level of autonomy that it needs to be given to a team so they can complete a task to a degree that they feel happy with as well, not only you. You may never be 100% satisfied with what someone else makes because you didn't make it. And you can honestly take those issues to therapy. It's not your teammates to deal with. And by the way, as context, both me and Zah had an agreement that if we were going to direct a team, we both would be in therapy because we didn't want to be the manager that are pushing all of their problems to the people that we're working with. Making games is a collective effort, and if you don't want it to be the exact way you want, you might as well go work on something else that you can actually do alone. I don't know. Iteration is cool until it isn't. There's only so much detachment that one can do before we don't care at all. This is not to say that we shouldn't iterate or throw away work ever, but sometimes things really don't work. But we all know that that's not what we're talking about, right? Because what I'm talking about is when we are being victims of perfectionism, and we need to control every single bit of something that someone's producing in a game. And that approach barely works when you're by yourself. You can't finish something if you're working on it endlessly until the point of perfection, which does not exist, by the way. There's no such thing as a perfect thing. So insensate iterating and trashing work is a great way of demoralizing your team. And as long as someone gets the idea of the intention of what is being created, you can move to the next part. Everyone's time is limited. And here comes compromising. Some parts of your game are gonna suck, and that's completely okay. You gotta pick your battles. A video game isn't a solid thing. Even at its smallest iteration, it's still like a song, a line of code, a piece of art, like a character. It's a relationship of many, many mediums that conveying an idea of a given moment. How that is felt by the player is not fully under our control, but it's always a sum of all its parts. We can work it out so it's just enough that our message is fully understood. And if there's time left over after trying to accomplish things not to a level of perfection, even better, because then we have extra time to polish at the end. And if we don't, that's great too, because we're releasing a game. We're actually getting things done. While making Moonglow Bay, we had one major focus, which was the day-to-day fishing. It needed to be very tight, and it needed to be relaxing. That's where we put the most effort. It was the most developed mechanic. It was also the most tested. It had the most variety. And that's where we put most of our time. Besides the story, we knew that cooking would come second, and our efforts and the major encounters, which are the boss fish, that would come third. It can be seen very simple gameplay-related numbers. We had 151 fish. They were concept modeled, rigged, animated, placed, balanced, tested. We had 62 recipes that didn't have to be animated and rigged, thank God, which made it possible for the number to be still fairly big. And we had 5 major encounters, which are our boss battles. We know that wasn't the strongest bit of our game, and we were completely okay with it because making choices like this make it so people don't need to crunch while developing our game to feel someone's idea of perfect, whatever that is. And now it's the part that I'm actually a little bit better at, which is working remotely. I have been working remotely since the start of my career in 2013, back in Brazil, with teams from all over the world. And the current state of remote work from 2020 forwards, we were also desperate looking for a human connection that we've been all the best bits of remote work. And I feel like the state has regressed and not come back much because studios decided to simulate everything of an in-person office in the digital space. And that also throws away a lot of the things that make remote work accessible. It made sense when we're not allowed to get out of the house and go back to offices, but 5 years later, the dynamic still is the same. We're reproducing the same mistakes in digital environments, essentially. Constant calls and meetings are not a solution to remote work. It's repeating the same issues that you find in the office, which is constantly interrupting work and not being able to focus because of it. Also, why does remote work need to be in the same region now? Why do we need so many calls? And where did the flexible hours go? Why are we pinging colleagues in the middle of their night in case they're not in the same region as us? And why are emulating virtual offices and need to be online and ready to chat at all moments? For the love of God, can I just take one bathroom break without being asked for an impromptu meeting? And the answers to those questions are not here. I'm so sorry about that. I'm here to tell you why remote work is valuable, and I really don't want to do another call about it. The value of remote work and where its strengths lie, in my opinion, is the possibility of asynchronous work or work that is not done at the same time. Documentation, a wider talent pool, possibility for better focus, and predictability and accessibility for some of us. Some of us need to listen to 4 hours of uninterrupted Driftdale City music to get something done. So we have, and where remote work strength lies is the documentation that allows for asynchronous work. Searching written text is much easier and saves a lot of time when needing to get information from someone rather than asking over and over again. And if you say, oh, I'm always available. No, you're not. You need to respect other people's time, and you also need to respect your own time. So the wider talent pool is, I always say that we have been super lucky with our team members and everyone that we got to work with at Bunnyhug. Because we all went along so well, but I actually think luck only played a part in that result. The fact that we were open to all locations all over the world to work and to look for people that could fit the project, and not only fit the project, but people that could also fit our studio, our morals, and the way of working played a massive role into it. And the results that was most of the conflict that there was during development was with external people. And another topic is accessibility. And I'm going to give examples that are pertinent to me because I cannot speak for others, of things that make remote work so accessible. There is reduction of conscious and subconscious bias towards, in this case, me in the workplace based on visible characteristics, because I have seen attitudes change once they see how I am in a video call. there's the flexibility in hours allow me to take frequent breaks and spread my workday a little bit wider. And I need those because of joint pain. There's no office overstimulation with colleagues talking around you or not being able to control lighting or not being able to control sounds around you. I get less flare-ups because due to our conditioning, honestly. There's less exhaustion due to constant socializing and having to mask and having behaviors that are appropriate to the workplace. I'm actually able to focus because of all of that. There's no travel time, which is also very unpredictable, which doesn't bode well with a lot of people. There's guaranteed access to food that I can actually eat and I won't have allergies to or won't worsen my condition. There is time to process information, which is fundamental for my work. And it also means that I need to rely less on my very unreliable memory to get important information about whatever I'm working on. And there's very specific work ergonomic needs that I have to minimize daily pain, and that legally should be provided by employers, but we all know that is not the case. And that all ties somehow to documentation and asynchronicity. And I want the games industry in particular to learn a bit more from other art-focused industries. So let's do it. I started my career back in Brazil in graphic design, actually. It wasn't in games. And after that, I moved to 2D animation. I was an art assistant and concept artist in animation for roughly a year. And both my times in both industries was very brief, but it taught me where structure is needed and where structure can maybe be lost a little bit, because it can be detrimental. And one of the structure that was actually really needed and was the most useful thing I took from both places is art Bibles and brand guidelines. I don't know if you ever saw one, but brand guidelines, essentially, when a graphic designer, they create a logo, they also create how to use that logo. What can you do? How much spacing a logo needs? What are the colors of the brand? And what you should not do. And in art Bibles, often you can see character turnarounds, especially in 2D, so you can, and think, for example, facial expressions that a character can do, and how they often behave, how they move, stuff like that. And I kind of brought both of these two games because they were immensely helpful on keeping the project consistent and truly really easy to work on. And of course, then in games we have game design documents, but it doesn't work if we just keep succumbing to the joke that they're just made so we can get either a publisher or a funding group to look at our game, and then we abandon it forever. I promise you that this ties to the role of a director is to bridge communication, or a director or any director in games, really. And do you know how we can avoid being on constant calls with our team? By doing two things, which is bridging communication between the relevant team members, because once I took to heart an advice that I took that you can't just present a problem in a call full of people and hope that it's going to magically be solved. If you have a problem and you're the director of a project or the lead of a project, you should know who are the people that can actually help with it, because if you want a call, you can go on a call with those 2 people or 3 people and solve it there and then pass it to the rest of the team. And documenting important and relevant information, that's another way of bridging communication. And you should make it very clear and compelling. It should be compelling for you to do, it should be fun for you to do, and it should be easy for people to observe the information that they need out of that. And it's important to keep them constantly updated. and adapt to your team's needs, of course. And this ties to not running a marathon the whole way, actually. Something I took, sometimes something that took a while to craft and document comes out better than something that took 50 iterations to make. We gotta let people absorb discussions and documentation and ideas at their own pace. You may go, when you go to an art gallery, if you guys have ever done it, you may see that some people can just look at a painting for like 5 seconds and they move to the next and it's fine and they're happy with that. And some people do stand there for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to try to understand what's going on. People have different paces and we need to take that to heart. And finally, documentation. I really love boring work. I did not expect that, but I love spreadsheets. I love writing. I love mock-upping stuff. Some context is that, as someone that wears many hats, I never went really deep into implementing UI and VFX, for example. I can animate them, I can create all of the assets, but throughout my career, until very recently, I never had time to actually go into the engine and learn how to do it. It was either that or doing my work, and I had to do my work. So with that in mind, I have some examples. These are very early examples from my work in Moonglow. I was, 21 years old when I made these. This was for UI stuff, and this was very simple VFX mockup that I did, just to show how things were actually working. And the complexity of the mockups changed, and even the readability changed over time. And it would vary depending on what you're explaining and who you're explaining to. At the point of this mockup, we were only three people working in Moonglow. It was me, Zach, and Shelly, our programmer, and she was specialized in UI and UX, so there was very little that I had to explain to her. And she also really loved creating the animations herself and implementing them, so during that period, I never went far into explaining that. But as our team grew, it was up to any programmer to pick up a piece of UI to implement, and things started getting really complex. The mockup still worked, but they started taking much more of my time. And because it was different people picking up on the documents that previously worked for this very specific UI programmer, now the questions would pop up more, and we would have to do sometimes calls to explain what was needed, really, even with all of this information. But I still went really far into it. This was for our VFX person, and this for me was when it went too far, because this was not the actual main mockup. This was called what ifs, because I got so many questions of, oh, what if this happens? What if this goes way beyond what is considered normal in UI? What do we do? And I did do it, and it was extremely helpful, but it got too much. It got too verbose, and it got to the point that I was wasting my time, so I actually had to update my method of making documents for others. So during that period that I mentioned to you guys earlier, that we had research and development at Bunnyhug, I took some time to learn Figma. And it was a whole month of every single team member. They would choose a thing that they wanted to learn, and if they needed a course or something, we would get it for them, and then they would go learn on their own, and then we would share our results. And I wanted to learn Figma specifically because my context was as a previously graphic designer and someone that was also graduated within it, it was a much less steep learning curve than Unity, and I could still make, like I could simulate interactions with it. And that took away so much time of me having to write like what typography we're using, what is the size of stuff. They could just like go and interact with the file in itself to see the placement. Like you can see that there is the coordinates of the element that I'm holding on the screen there. And yeah, sometimes high complexity was still needed. This was like the first mock-up that we did for our prototype. So I wanted to make sure we had some things, like a glossary almost made for the typography. And some stuff was extremely simple because of the glossary made and all of the possibility of any of our programmers going and interacting with my file, that I basically only had to write one thing there, which was where the mouse would interact with the screen. And sometimes complexity would have to go really far. I don't know if I can press play on that video. But essentially, when things were really complex, I would now have time to actually spend explaining those things properly instead of having to make everything super, super text heavy. OK, so the play did work. This was essentially just showing the animations of this. And then I also took the approach for complex feedback, not necessarily day-to-day feedback. In this specific example, it was not for Bunnyhug work. It was for a friend's game called Overthrown that I worked for a year while freelancing. And when I was doing a paint over on their clouds, I was aware that I was going to give this paint over to a programmer. So like our knowledge base was different. Our knowledge base was fairly different. And I also know that the thing that I wanted to accomplish was composed of many, many different layers. So while I was doing the paint over itself, I would take notes. I would interrupt myself, take notes, and I would notice that some things that I wanted to do were unrealistic, so I would dial back. And then I finished giving this document to the programmer. And then you may ask me, what about the game design document? Isn't that the Art Bible equivalent in games? And more or less, I think there's some integration to be done, but I wasn't responsible for our game design documents at Bunnyhug. It was Zach. And if you want to see or talk to Zach about it, they will happily do it, I'm sure. But what I know and what I helped with sometimes was keeping the document up to date. You may see even at that corner that even though the game was released in 2021, it was last edited this February 10th, because we still have a team of working on porting the game, especially for Switch and PlayStation. And this was the evolution from Moonglow to Magic Row, because we noticed that it was hard to access some of the deeper links into the document, so we just created a wiki. It's all in Notion, still the same. The core learning in this for me is to build documentation in a style that the receiver can understand what they're reading, and providing all the information they need to complete a task uninterrupted once you give the task. It may differ from person to person how you approach this, but the core is there. And here comes accessibility again. People are all different, so it doesn't hurt to document taking your team into consideration. it also helps you better understand and communicate your thoughts to your teammates. Some team members may be more visual. So, for example, Shelly, that's when I started doing all the mock-ups because she was way more visual. Some were more, need more concise instructions, while others appreciate detailed instructions, which some of the programmers that we hired later on needed, and that's when the complexity of the wiki came about. I'll give myself as an example why this plays into accessibility. I have something called delayed processing, which makes all those calls and verbal instructions really hard for me. Because you can ask me in a call if I can make key art in 2 days, or if I think making the fishing 10 times more stressful is a good idea for a relaxing fish RPG, and I'm gonna answer yes because I'm so desperate to get like a answer out. And then I'm gonna turn off the call, and 2 hours later I'm gonna be like, shit, I can't make a key art in a week, in like 2 days, that's absurd. But then I already said yes, so I'm gonna have to backtrack. There's some shame also into that, of course, on the delayed processing. So, and sometimes instructions are just not enough, so it's good to be able to read them back. So whenever my colleagues make videos explaining things to me, I'm really appreciative. Because I always check it more than once, by the way. It's just part of how my brain functions. And this all... And you may be wondering why I haven't talked much about asynchronicity yet, and actually, this entire time I have. Because documentation is essential to be able to work in different time zones. Our team was spread across from GMT -9 to GMT +10, so it was 6 time zones and 19 hours of the difference between the furthest places. That would not have been possible or healthy if we didn't do proper documentation the way that we did, with mockups, videos, GEDs, and even like more structured Discord messages with like point form and everything else. Accepting that chat via text works perfectly fine, and it allows other team members to catch up to conversations and join if needed, as well as being able to search back previous conversations. We had to be respectful of each other's time and trusting that messages would be read without pinging each other in the middle of the night. And we also had to build confidence on sharing your work in progress and having files accessible to everyone in case it was needed for someone to fix something or to have access quick. And by the way, we still had calls. It's not that we were entirely text-based. We still had moments to bond as a team. Every Monday we had a stand-up that was split into 2 calls, one for the earlier time zones and one for the later, so everyone can be at back to work or back to their lives at a reasonable time. And about once a month we would play a game, we would play a game together, and it was at a reasonable time for everyone but me and Zach, because it was like at 1 a.m. UK time, but I didn't want to impose that onto others. We were the ones that hired them and wanted to bond with them. No, so I'm not going to impose that into them. And anyway, why isn't this approach succeeding? And a little disclaimer that I know the reasons why we're in the situation that we are in today, such a reduced amount of... Ish? Do you know what that is? Just 1 minute.
Este es...
So I know many of the reasons that we're in this situation, that we have greatly reduced the team size, sadly. Some are mistakes of our own making, and some are due to timing. we started looking for funding exactly as all the funding sources started to dry out drastically. And mainly because we refused to mold to ourselves to what was asked of us. Like not wanting to approach making games that follow trends, not because we are better than that and we don't want to make trendy games, but because it was not the games that we were interested in making as a team. We didn't want to follow exploitative models of work that the industry seeks to impose into the studios. And when I mean industry, I mean funding groups and publishers. We gotta eat. We're people. So our funding routes asked us for prototypes that actually wanted to be pitched with, they asked for prototypes, but they actually wanted to be pitched with vertical slices. And the question is, with what money do you make your vertical slice if the prototype that you made was already to ask for funding? Budget negotiations effectively asked for shrinking salaries, and we were providing fair wages that would keep up with inflation, and we did not want to go back on that. We're expected to give unrealistically small time frames for concluding projects and either crunch hard to accomplish that time frame, or like pretend that we didn't know that we actually needed 2 years and not 1, and try to scramble for more funding and hope that they would actually provide it. And having to approach making our art, which is games, as a product first was an experience that we tried for a little bit out of desperation, trying to keep the team together, and we all hated it. It was fairly miserable, and we noticed that there's currently also no space for game experiences that are not replayable, because how are you going to sell an experience that you only play once, even though that's what movies are and what books are, comics are. And we would like to keep exploring new art. Me and Zach, for example, are artists first and foremost, and we were asked to, why don't we do the same art style that we did to Mongol Bay? Because we like to explore. We would like to keep exploring art. Like being put in a box of something that you did when you were 21 years old, it's quite painful. And I thought we might as well, and the reason why we took the loans was, let's all go look for work. We might as well work as freelancers and being well paid, instead of imposing this kind of struggling for food, struggling for time and sleep onto others. And currently, me and Zach, for example, are doing freelance while we pay bills and pay the loans back to the company. And Greg, our current programmer, works full-time, paid by Mongol sales. We're lucky enough to have that. We don't want to impose misery into others, and that's why we ended up also reducing and going that route. I have said a lot about the subject, but to sum up, there's a few brief points. You need to give your team room to breathe so they can accomplish the work uninterrupted as much as possible. Documentation is vital to reduce friction in development, so document everything you can, it doesn't hurt. And tailoring your documentation to those who will be using it is ideal in a small team across different time zones. My experience in running a studio and making games with a small team was really made it clear that I want to make smaller games in a reasonable amount of time to allow for us to get the best out of everyone without ever compromising on health. That is going to give the most satisfying art in more ways than one, because you made a game, everyone has energy to enjoy making that game and playing it. You can keep making games without the need to take extended holidays or be ill like I became after working in some studios. And you get to make more games. I keep wondering if it's too much to ask something that we spend half of our days doing have some sort of dignity and joy to it. And if making games in a way that means, if making games that way means that we are failure in the eyes of the system, then so be it. So I'm happy to keep being a failure. And I don't want to succeed for art's sake. And any questions? I think it's this one, actually.
¿Ahora? ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? ¿Preguntas? ¿Questions?
Hi. If you are not following a trend for the art, you just decide the art style. How do you decide the art style for your games?
Usually goes like back to us thinking about the theme of the game. For example, the second game that we were doing was called Magic Roll. And we wanted to do something surrounded by animals. We wanted to take a break from designing for humans. And the contact that, for example, I had with animals was mostly in Brazil, so I thought, why not make everything kind of inspired by South America itself? So all the design of South American, like indigenous clay pots and stuff like that were taken into consideration. For Moonglow, of course, we are doing all in voxels, but for Moonglow, I wanted to bring like a nostalgic vibe, so I made everything feel a little bit like an Instagram or like a Polaroid filter. And we also, like, the close of the game, for example, we had the game set in 1983, so we got inspired by that. And my favorite part of making games is researching as well, so I really got deep into researching how people actually look in the 80s in Canada, in that very specific region, so like looking for family photos instead of getting inspired by generic stuff. It's that, and sometimes I get really obsessed with certain design movements. I was looking into constructivism at one point for the game that we're making now. So all the UI I haven't shown any of this, but all the UI for that game is inspired by constructivism and humanism in design. So yeah, it's usually a mix of what we're obsessed with, what the game is set on, and sometimes what pleases our eyes, really.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. I was told to ask a very quick question, but
Yeah.
I hope it feels like a loaded one. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry.
So as someone with like a fellow chronic illness, I'm wondering, how do you navigate, like you mentioned the shame and everything.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any tips on how to navigate finding accommodations, giving yourself accommodation and
Yeah.
space. Like if you have any tips for kind of navigating all of that in the industry as well.
Yeah, so at the very beginning of my career I didn't even know I was able to begin with. I found out like much later, but I was mutually ashamed and not. I kind of said to my employee, hey, I have tried working in an office that's completely open and with people talking to my side. I cannot work. I cannot focus. And I also have tried working with like the tablets that sit on your desk rather than ones that are like this. And I'm in so much pain at the end of the day that I cannot work on the next day. So like it was essentially, you already hired me. It's either you kind of help me or you're gonna lose me for half of the week because I'm exhausted or I'm in pain or I am having flare-ups. And sometimes there were, like, at my first job in the UK, Chocofish actually had a lot of communications, but later on I didn't have as many, and essentially I talked to the employer, since you can't accommodate me in your office, can I work most of the time from home, because in my home I have the whole setup. And for our employees, we would offer to buy equipment, because they were in their own house. And as I gained more confidence and gained like more possibility of keeping a job, I started being a bit more straightforward. I said, hey, I'm not gonna get this job if I need to work 5 days a week, because I cannot do 5 days a week. My joints cannot handle it. I'm not gonna do this job if you're bringing me on a call all the time. They accepted it. They didn't follow through with it. I ended up being on calls all the time. But essentially, before I got the job, after I was more established, I was able to ask for all those things. But I had to be straightforward. I couldn't not lie, but omit, because at the end of the day, if I hurt myself, then I'm gonna be 2-3 weeks out of commission. And when at Bunnyhug, it was pretty straightforward. I said at one point, let's do 4 days a week, and Zach was like, yeah, let's do 4 days a week. We tested it for a month. Didn't change production. People seemed happier, actually, and that was an accommodation that we did for everyone. So essentially, at the beginning, I kind of like cornered people into hiring me, and once I was hired, I was like, I need this. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you want to say goodbye, something.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you so much for listening to me rant for so long. And yeah.